Hello and welcome to EB Knits. My name is Emily. I am the maker behind everything you see here on this channel. Most of the time they are vlogs and podcasts that I'm posting every 2 weeks or so, but this time it is going to be an introduction and a background on my knitting journey. I have recorded this video a couple of times today so far. I've changed where I'm sitting because I just felt like it was boring. So I'm going to try and condense it and be a little more high energy and just share with you how I came to knit and where I'm at in my knitting process, and let's get to it. My name is Emily. I live in Orlando, Florida. I'm originally from the Midwest and from Illinois, the southwest suburbs of Chicago specifically. Grew up there my entire life in one small town, and then I turned 18, went to college at Loyola University Chicago, which is on the north side of the city, and I lived there for 4 years after I graduated as well in Chicago, so I loved it, if I'm being honest, and I do miss it sometimes. I didn't think I would miss it, but I definitely miss the seasons, and I miss the city. But I do like Orlando as well. I love the weather being warm. I love the sunshine. I love all the flowers here. I moved here in January of 2020, shortly before the pandemic, of course. I live with my boyfriend, and we have a kitty Moonlight that we took in, and this is our apartment. Welcome! Hopefully we're moving this year. So I have some notes just I jotted down, but I'm going to try not to be boring about it. Also here, it is not just knitting, it is mainly knitting, but I do talk about politics, things I believe in, inclusivity, and whatever's really on my mind, or if something's going on in the news or here in Florida, politically, I will talk about it if it's important to me and I want to share, because I do think that is important for me, yeah, it is important. So that's what I want to talk about. But you will find a little bit of that sprinkled here and there as well on this channel. Someone who loves to knit every single day, like to hang out outside when I don't get sunburned. And yeah, knitting's my favorite hobby. Yeah, all right, let's move on. So how and why I started to knit. So knitting actually is not something I grew up with. I started knitting in 2017. This was after I graduated in college, and I was living in the city with one of my best friends. And I don't know, I was up late one night in bed thinking, if I knew how to knit, I would be doing that right now. I don't know how that came to me. I don't know where that thought came from. I never really thought about knitting before consciously, but that's what started it all. So the next day I went to Michael's. I grabbed some knitting needles, these plastic straight ones that I still have but never ever use, and some yarn. I think it was Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick, and I went on YouTube and I figured out, with tons and tons of frogging and redoing, how to make a scarf. It was just a garter stitch scarf. It was pretty wacky and wonky with the major increases and decreases because I didn't understand what was a stitch yet or not at the time. But yeah, that's how I started knitting. So I made a scarf. I don't have it anymore. I gave it to some guy, and I started making beanies after that, and that's just, I still didn't knit daily. Like I wasn't a lifestyle knitter like I would say I am now, but that probably happened during the pandemic, honestly. That's where it all began, and then people would tell me, I didn't really ever think it was possible to knit a garment or a sweater or make a wardrobe with knitting. I didn't know really about that. I just thought it was beanies and scarves and such. So I was just making hats on hats on hats. And finally, enough people told me, oh, you should sell them, that I listened, and I started selling them. So I started EB Knits. I just went for it, which is what I recommend to any of you who want to start a business or even start knitting. Just do it. Just start. You're going to make mistakes along the way. I made a ton of mistakes, still making mistakes, but I learned so much and I've grown so much, both as a business owner, as a person, as a knitter, really with any hobby or any endeavor you want to partake in. Just start, in my opinion. So I started selling them just to family and friends, basically. I started my own website. I had a website already for my journalism clips and stuff, and I wasn't really updating it, so I kind of turned that into my own website for knitting, And like I said, was just selling them to family friends. It was not proper. Like, there wasn't a proper brand. I didn't have a tagline. I didn't have colors. It wasn't cohesive. It was very thrown together, which at the time I worked my ass off to get it done. So I didn't think it was thrown together at the time, but looking back, yeah, it's not a good representation of where I want to be now, but that's the point in learning, right? So yeah, so that was a few years where I was just selling my hats and beanies, and then I moved here in January of 2020. I think I said that already. And I still had the intention of selling items. I did learn to crochet during the pandemic, and I really I was nervous moving here. Like, what is that going to mean for my knitting, because it's warm weather? And at the time, I still hadn't explored, knitting outside of, like I said, the winter accessories. So I learned to crochet, and I crocheted coasters. Crochet is nice for blankets. Let me get the sun hats. So I made a few sun hats. These are all crochet. Knitting is number one in my heart for sure, but crochet I appreciate for what it can do and its sturdiness. So sun hats, blankets are quicker crocheted. Coasters, baskets. I don't have a basket right next to me, but all of that, those are a few specific examples of what I think are. Bags are great for crochet because it does create such a sturdy fabric. So yeah, I started selling things like that, and then I still did a winter accessories line, and it was my first ever time using wool to sell, super bulky wool. I had a whole line set up, and it just wasn't successful. I think part of it was that my customer base was still family, and well, not only had the prices gone up because I was using more expensive materials, but I wasn't in Illinois anymore. I don't know. So that was kind of a flop, unfortunately. So I went ahead and donated all of my made winter accessories at this point, and I do still have quite a bit of that super bulky yarn left. So making hats or pillows or something with it is an intention of mine, or maybe even destashing and selling it is something that I want to do this year. But where was I? Yeah, so I've kind of pivoted at this point. I am not really selling my knits anymore. That was my EB Knits, my selling journey. Let's talk about my personal knitting journeys. I joined a knit collage, knit along. That wasn't my first garment. My first garment was the Color Block Cardi. It was a kit from Lion Brand, I think. I know it was a kit from Lion Brand. I think that was my first garment. It was massive. It was too big. I recently ripped it apart. If you've seen any of my videos from probably November, December, January of 2021, 2022, it was too big. It was super bulky acrylic yarn. I sweated anytime I moved in this, basically. I tried to give it to my mom and sister. They had the same situation where it was just too heavy, too big, too hot. So I ripped it apart and used it for a few hats that I've made since, and a blanket I crocheted for my dad. So that is almost completely used up, and I'm glad. That's something else I've learned is if you're not going to wear it, like, yeah, you spent a lot of time making it, but if you're not going to wear your garment, then what's the point, like, of just having it there? You might as well make it into something that I'm adding lessons as a bullet point onto the end, but for now I'll tell you this one. So if you're if you don't like it, don't let it just sit there. Like, redo it. Yeah, it took so much time, but that's my opinion, at least. And then it's not an opinion I had at first, because I was like, there's so much time, I'm gonna make this work. But now it took so much time. I want it to be right, I want it to be used, and I'm gonna fix it or change it to make it usable and useful for my lifestyle or someone else's. So yeah, so anyway, that was when my first one. Then my second that was a cardigan. My second cardigan, or second garment, was the Knit Collage Knit Along in fall of 2019. I highly recommend. They are expensive. They're expensive for a reason, because it's hand spun yarn, but it's completely worth it. Even joining like the Knit Collage membership, she has a membership she opens up a few times a year where it's a group of knitters. I am not in it, but based on the knit along videos, I highly recommend. Like, yeah, I learned to knit through YouTube, but those were so informative and they came with so many tools and notions. Like, they're amazing for a beginner, honestly. So I highly recommend the Knit Collage knit alongs. There's two, one in the spring, one in the fall every year. If you're a new knitter and want to learn to make your first garment, or not a knitter, you're just intimidated to make your first garment, do it with a group of knitters, and if you can afford it, that's amazing. So I haven't participated since because of the affordability factor, but again, loved it, and I love the finished product. It's a cardigan, it's colorful, it's fantastic. It's still at my parents' house, otherwise I would show you it here. When I moved, I did leave some of my cold, like my sweaters and my first things I ever knit, I think are still there, just because I have no use for them here, and when I'm visiting, I can just grab them. So as long as I have space for them and are willing to do that for me, I definitely appreciate it. Okay, so that's, so I did make a few sweaters in 2019, but then 2020, move here, pandemic, learned to crochet, still doing EB knits. I guess maybe it was 2021, after that winter accessories product line didn't go so well, I kind of lost some motivation for EB knits, and I started making a lot more of my own garments. I had made a few garments here or there throughout 2020, but 2021 I think is where I really just dived in, whatever it is, and made my own garments. So tank tops, short sleeve sweaters using cellulose fibers like cotton. This is bamboo. Yeah, or even just wool, but making a short sleeve. Like, you can totally knit in warm weather. Don't let that stop you. I didn't realize, I just didn't expand my mind, but you can totally knit in warm weather. Don't let it stop you. You can make crop tops, you can make, like I said, tank tops, you can use different yarns, you can use different fibers, just experiment, and there's no limit. So you can make accessories if you don't want to make garments, and that is when I got into knitting podcasts. That's where I got into making all my own garments, and yeah, so dipped my toes in 2019, 2020, and then dove headfirst in 2021. I made so many, and I'm still on that train. I love knitting for myself. I love knitting gifts. There's so much less pressure, and I just enjoy it a lot. So this is one of them. This is the, I don't know what sweater I'm wearing, if I'm being honest, but yeah, I don't know what sweater I'm wearing. Or it's a t-shirt. I'm wearing a knit t-shirt made in bamboo. I don't remember the pattern or the designer right now off the top of my head, but it's on this channel already, and it's definitely on my Ravelry page. I keep track of everything on Ravelry. I know it's not accessible for everyone, but so if you can't access my Ravelry page, or you have questions and it's not on my YouTube channel, you can just leave a comment or email me, whatever. I'm happy to talk, but yeah, I find it very helpful and reliable for just tracking my notes, my info, my projects, seeing how many I made in a year, etc. So yeah, I definitely appreciate Ravelry. And that brings me to here. So yeah, I made my first ever shawl last year. This was a significant part of my knitting journey, if I'm being honest. This is my second West Knits pattern. The other was a brioche hat. This is the pattern. This is the shawlography. This is his October mystery knit along. So this is the design that made me more of a process knitter rather than a progress knitter. Because before I was definitely like, I want to finish this, I need to finish this and that. But just kind of the way this was set up and seeing how, like, what the possibilities are with knitting and that I can actually do something like this. You know, there's 4 clues, so every week a clue is released, and it was just, okay, this massive project that looks so detailed, if you break it down into bite-sized chunks, you can do it in a month or 2 months, or, however long it takes. It could take a lot longer than that, but it's just the fact that if you break a complicated project down into bite-sized pieces, it's manageable. You can make it work. And that's something I guess I should have already known, but I showed myself that was true, and I absolutely love this shawl. I showed myself that was true with this project, and ever since, I think I've appreciated the details, the more complicated, the texture, and felt like I can accomplish that. Which is, speaking of, another one of my favorite parts of knitting. Like, I can knit a sweater. I can knit a complicated looking shawl like this. I can knit a blanket. Like, I can figure out how to make a sun hat. Knitting, crochet, fiber arts makes me feel like I can do anything, basically. And if I can knit a sweater, I can figure out something else in another area of my life. Amy Small of Knit Collage says this same sentiment a lot too, that knitting makes her feel powerful, basically. And I completely agree with that. Like, I learned to knit. I taught myself how to knit via YouTube. If I can do that, I can do a lot of things. So, yeah, it just makes me feel happy, full of confidence. I love to wear my handmade garments. I feel the most comfortable, the most confident in them. I love them. I love the idea of hand making my wardrobe at some point, having a full wardrobe of like knits or stuff that I made myself or something. Okay, so I didn't even talk about this like revelation that I had. That wasn't this revelation, but one before that. In 2019, I was listening to this knitting podcast. It's an audio podcast, Be Hooked Crochet, and she was talking to Hannah Thiessen, and she's the author of books Slow Knitting and Slow Knitting Seasonally. And she was talking about what slow knitting means. So it's being mindful of your knitting and tracing things like your yarn or your tools, where you're spending your money, back to the original maker. Or in the case of, wool, the original sheep, the original farm, seeing how the workers are treated, seeing how the animals are treated, and just basically spending your money with intention. This is another just like a life changer for me, honestly. Some bell was rang, something happened and just switched in my mind where it's affected not just my knitting, but everything from my knitting to my laundry detergent. So investing in a small business when possible. I know it's not always possible, especially like I get it. I get it. It's not possible all the time, but being more mindful and purposeful with where I spend my money, with my purchases, with the products I use, with the materials I use when I'm knitting, and supporting makers like me, supporting people with similar ethics to me, where workers have rights and are have a salary that's livable, environmentally friendly, initiatives. Anyway, just endless, and everyone's priorities are different, and nothing is perfect. Everything has caveats. I completely understand that. But that just made a whole switch in my whole life, like I said, from my cleaning products, everything. Just being more mindful and trying to be more purposeful with where I'm spending my money and what I'm investing in. So yarns like Malabrigo, I was using all acrylic yarns, which, again, for affordability and stuff, and machine washability for kids, all of that, it definitely has its positives. But for me, I just felt like the negatives outweighed the positives after learning about acrylic yarns. And again, anyway, like I said, there's caveats to everything, because maybe acrylic yarn is better versus wool when an animal is treated like garbage, and that's not right either. So you got to make sure you don't have to do anything. But me personally, I want to try and make sure things are ethical when it comes to workers, animals, everything down the product line. So anyway, just being more mindful of using cellulose and animal fibers was a huge change for me, and finding businesses, hopefully small businesses ideally, that have similar values was just mind changer. And it was just this podcast that switched my mind like that. So I definitely appreciate that. Okay, that's my knitting journey. It took 21 minutes, so hopefully I didn't bore you to death. I've loved with knitting that it's made me made me want to dive into other fiber arts, from embroidery. That was really fun. I've only done one embroidery project, and I gave it to my sister, but that was really fun. I've learned crochet. I've learned Tunisian crochet, which was fun. I'm learning to spin yarn. Like, there's just so many different elements, and it's so fun to just dive headfirst into all of them and continue to learn and expand in the fiber arts community. But knitting still my number one at heart. Yeah, so I started this knit podcast in January 2021, I think. And originally it started as a way to kind of like promote my business partially, but then, like I said, 2021 pretty much became the year of making personal garments and my personal items. So it changed into just me sharing my making, and that's what I love at this point. That's what this podcast is. It's all about me sharing my knitting journey and my knitting, what I'm working on, what I'm loving, sharing patterns, sharing other knitting podcasts, that kind of thing. So that's what you'll see here, and usually it's vlogs and showing you my making while I'm actually doing it. Also because, like I said, I like to be detailed, but at the same time, sometimes I forget things when I'm sitting here after the fact, so talking to you right when things come up and vlogging about it has been fun. So I'll probably get back into that. I just, there'll be some vlogs, there'll be some podcasts, there'll be a mix. My final things was lessons when I'm knitting, and I know I added that mid-video. I kind of told you some of my favorite things about knitting. It makes me feel powerful, it makes me feel confident, it makes me feel like I can accomplish almost anything, and I think that's a really good place to leave this, just with all the positives about knitting. Like, even with going back to school lately, I found just knitting simple stockinette while I'm reading helps me keep my concentration. It helps me stay focused. It makes me feel productive, just in general. So it makes me feel all of these positive emotions and feelings, and I hope everyone finds a hobby or something that makes them feel that way as well, because it's really honestly been like a life changer. Yeah, everything from my mindset about eco-friendliness, which I don't know, maybe that would have happened anyway, to investing in local businesses, to just feeling productive and feeling so proud and confident about my knitting, to engaging with this knit community, finding not just like-minded people. I was telling this to my mom yesterday, actually. Like, this whole knitting community, we all have this shared hobby and shared interest, but we're all so different. We're from different countries, we have different backgrounds, we're from different communities, we're different races, different ethnicities, different cultures. And just to, yeah, I like the knitting and sharing that, but learning about everyone's background as well, it's just, I love that. I love that about this community. So, all right. On that note, I'm going to call it. I think, hopefully, this wasn't boring, but my name is Emily. Thank you for watching the EP Knits podcast, and I can't wait to show you more of my knitting and where this knitting journey takes me. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, wonderful week, wonderful year.